Hello to anyone who is watching this session after the fact. So glad that you are. I hope this is illuminating and fun for you as it always is for us. And let us begin with prayer. God of hope, from you come every blessing and all peace. Show us that in the midst of our struggles, you are with us. Give us the abundance of your grace, that we may do the work you give us to do, and that we may be for the world a sign of your presence. Through Christ, the way and the truth. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, so I wanted to start by sharing this quote from Rabbi Kushner, when bad things happen to good people, that I came across this week, and I thought about our conversation last week about Sodom and what the prevailing sin, the prevailing issue was that made God so mad at the occupants of Sodom. And so I thought maybe this would be a good discussion starter as we move forward with Genesis 19 and more disturbing behavior in Sodom and by Lot. So Rabbi Kushner writes, in Jewish thought, a sin is not an offense against God, an act of disobedience. A sin is a missed opportunity to act humanly. And I wondered what you all think about that, if anything. I bet you think things.
Looking at the range of human behavior, I'm wondering which dimensions of humanly we're talking about here.
Yeah.
I understand the point he's making, but
The first time I read it, Ray, I thought I read it as to act humanely, which actually
yeah,
made more sense to me. And then, and even just now as I read it, I almost said humanely because that's my impulse. So I think
mine
that's a
too.
good question.
I'm not
A lot of
sure
human,
this would fly with the prophets
Mm-hmm.
because I think they frequently refer to offenses against God and disobedience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's my sense too. Even the original sin is an act of disobedience. God says, "Don't eat the fruit," and the problem is that people didn't follow that rule.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like an act of disobedience and offense against God, and it's not clear what acting humanly or even humanely would be in that circumstance, other than following the rule.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that there can be both. There are sins of not acting, missing opportunities, let's say, not defending people who need defense or, whatever. And then there are people who actually commit an offense, who actually go forward with something. It's not the void of being good. It is actually a bad action. So I think that there can be both. They
So
can both be
I could
sins.
see the
But there's a differentiation between sitting there and not acting, being in, let's say, Nazi Germany population and not doing anything. There is a difference between what the people in Germany did and what the people in Amsterdam did. You know how the people in Amsterdam hid all of their townspeople. So that can be a sin by not acting. But then there are people who just act, disobediently, or even I'll use the word evil. There are people who do evil things, and those are sins to me. And it's not just, a missed opportunity to act humanly. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's
I
an
guess
opportunity to act sinfully or Satan-like, whatever. So
for me, the first card would seem to suggest that God has prescribed everything. And therefore, we always have to, everything he has told us, while in fact, the second part is more God created humans in his image.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is this acting humanly is in the image of God, as opposed to God has got not just 10 commandments, but 3,470 that you got to follow.
I love that, John. That distinction between the spirit and the letter of the law, coming from our resident attorney. I love that. Um, this quote really grabbed my attention because we talked last time about, what did it mean for Abraham to be righteous because the law hadn't been given yet. They had not received the commandments. And what was it that the people of Sodom were doing wrong? And we talked about the same sex, the homosexual acts or impulse, as opposed to the lack of hospitality and not treating fellow humans with the hospitality that was expected. And so this quote made me sort of think about all of that. And, as we read through Genesis, at this point, what do we mean when we talk about people sinning against God? I think it's worth fine tuning our language.
Is there a distinction here between sinning against God and sinning against other humans?
Good question.
I think sins against other humans are sins against God.
Ah, I think Jesus would say that for sure. Anything else?
Just out of curiosity, in what context is he writing this?
I don't know, Chuck. That's a great question. I don't have that book, A Celebration to Life, A Celebration of Jewish Being and Thinking. But he is the man who wrote When Bad Things Happen to Good People.
Okay.
After his son, he was a rabbi in Massachusetts in a neighboring town where I grew up. After his son was born with the horrible disease, the disease, and I can't think of the name of it, where children age prematurely. And so, what's that? What's that, Ray?
It's progenaria.
Thank
Oh.
you. I couldn't remember the name
I
of
think
it.
Something
it's
close to that.
Sharia,
Mm.
and it might or might not be relevant to think about where he came out in that book. Why
Mhm.
bad things happen to good people, which was he proposes it's because God is not all powerful.
Mm-hmm. 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 Exactly.
Do you remember when Jesus said something along the lines of, and I don't want to misquote, but if they're not against us, they're for us?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what he says. And
So,
people often think of that the opposite way, Kim. They think, and human nature is often to say, well, if you're not with us, you're against us. But that's not
right,
at
right,
all what Jesus says. Yeah.
right. And so then if I look at the bottom line, it's not like Jesus says these are sins. These are not bad things when you're not for me, if you're not overtly against me.
Hmm.
So those are missed opportunities, but he doesn't hold it against people.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, the reason I brought this quote to our attention in conversation today is I wanted to think about, what does it mean to say that somebody, in the context of our conversation about Genesis, that somebody sins? Because at least at the level of the narrative, the law has not yet been given to Moses. Now, of course, as we know, Genesis was written down much later when the Jewish people were in exile, so they would have already received the law. So it's sort of retrojected in there. But, what does it mean to sin against God. And Kushner's, what I find thought-provoking about Kushner is he suggests something beyond just the because I said so. It's not just that God wags his finger and says, thou shalt not. That there's a relational piece, there's a piece of hesed, which is loving kindness toward one's fellow human, that is part of it. And so as we move forward with Genesis 19 and we look at some of the behavior that we're about to read about, which, makes the hair in the back of my head stand up, it's worth thinking about what is actually the problem here. So with all of that preamble said, just a couple of reminders about Sodom. So archaeologists believe that Sodom is down here, south of the Dead Sea. What do you all know about the Dead Sea and environs?
The lowest place on earth, so many feet below mean ocean level.
Yep, the lowest place on earth. Usually the hottest
Reason-
place. Oh, go ahead, Ellie.
And
Sorry.
the reason it's so salty is that all the water, it has no outlet.
Mhm.
And so the water that flows into it only evaporates and just leaves the minerals behind.
Yes, yes, yes. This area of what is now Israel is really harsh, I will say. And this rendering, this is Mount Sodom. And you can see it's just, rock. And you can see, what the ground looks like there. And I share these visuals just as we're thinking about, where Lot is and what the topography, what the climate is like there, which I think is actually a character in this part of the story. So that's why I bring that up. Now, did I have anything else I wanted to show us before we get back to the text? No, we'll look at that later. Okay, so in the newsletter, I said we were picking up at verse 16, but it's actually verse 12. That was a typo. So before we go on with Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed, anything that you all wanted to either revisit or remind us about from last time? What happened last time?
Two angels came to visit Lot, or
Yeah.
at least, guys from out of town. And
Way out of town.
And the locals threatened them. And Lot said, here, have my daughters instead, because of the laws of hospitality. And the angels wound up blinding the attackers and driving them off and hiding in the house.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, perfect. So as we pick up at verse 12, the men are these visitors. Okay, so who would let's do 12 through 23, and I can scroll for us. Would someone like to read?
I can read.
Thanks, Kim.
Sure. Then the men said to Lot, have you anyone else here? Sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of the place. For we are about to destroy this place because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters, up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting. When morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or else you will be consumed in the punishment of the city. But he lingered. So the men seized him and his wife and his 2 daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and left him outside the city. When they had brought them outside, they said, "Flee for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the hills, or else you will be consumed." And Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lords, your servant has found favor with you, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life, but I cannot flee to the hills for fear the disaster will overtake me and I die. Look, that city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved." He said to him, "Very well, I grant you this favor too, and will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I can do nothing until you arrive there." Therefore the city was called Zoar. The sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zoar.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, so what do you hear? What intrigues you? What do you want to look at in this section?
I'm intrigued by the God grabbing Lot by the scruff of the neck and getting him out of there. Usually, I think we have to, we know what God wants and we have to do it. Rarely have I seen him reach down and been so proactive.
Yeah. Beautiful.
My NRSV says that Lot hesitates their urging to leave Sodom, requiring them to take him away by force. And then he doubts the rescue plan, and he wants to stop by this Zoar, meaning little. So that they make very much out of that, that he wasn't like Noah, he wasn't compliant.
Beautiful.
It seems like there's a transition where he's not believing, but then at some point he must be believing a little bit because he's negotiating where he can go.
Mhm. I focused on the sons-in-laws. If God was going to rescue Lot and his 2 daughters, why didn't he bring the sons-in-laws along with them?
Great question.
I think the 2 daughters, later footnote in the altar indicates that those might be or are his unmarried daughters who are still with his household, as opposed to the married daughters, of which there may have been many, who were apparently with their husbands.
But then the sons-in-law, they thought he was just jesting.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. So,
So did they get fried?
yeah, I think, yeah.
Who else doesn't believe what God's going to do or what God says?
Lot.
Abram and Sarah.
Yeah. I meant besides Lot. Yeah, Abraham and Sarah. Exactly. What did they do?
Wow.
they laugh.
Both laugh. They both laugh. Yeah. Abraham falls down on his face laughing. It's a good side slapper there. Yeah.
99, it's easy to get down there.
Exactly.
Easy to go.
Yeah.
Here comes Kim again. I think it's Alter who says that, let's just look at the word jesting in verse 14. Hey, Kim, glad you made it back.
Yeah, something happened.
Well, you fixed it, so that's good. So jesting means, okay, come on. Oh my gosh, I hate these pop-ups. How much time do we spend trying to get rid of them? Okay.
Pretty kitchen.
Yes. Would anyone like
Lovely.
the renovation like the blue? Anyway, so jesting, laugh, mock, play. So here we've got this theme of laughter again. So the sons-in-law think that Lot is just joshing, right? Just kidding, that, this isn't really going to happen. And then when the angels tell Lot, and they grab him by the scruff of the neck and say, get out of town, he's like, oh, no, 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 no. And that's when he starts to negotiate. And who else negotiates with God?
Abraham over the 50, 40, 30,
Yeah.
10.
Yeah. So poor God in this chapter, in this sojourn in Sodom, there's just everybody is, quibbling about things, and God's got to deal with these pesky humans who are constantly wanting to strike a deal. So it's just interesting to me, these parallels. What else is interesting to you here? Ray, do you think it's worth looking at the altar?
I've got it in front of me. I don't,
Let me pull it up.
well, let's see. What spot are you? Yeah, if that's better.
Don't leave them this.
But I hung up.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry. There we go.
A lot of narrative.
The men said to Lot, whom do you still have here? Your sons and your daughters, and whomever you have in the city, take out of this place. The Masoretic text, a different textual version, prefaces these words with son-in-law in the singular. But as numerous critics have observed, this makes no grammatical sense, and this particular term would not belong at the head of the list before sons and daughters. It seems quite likely that the word was erroneously transcribed from verse 14 and was not part of the original text. So we've got a question about those sons-in-law. And this in verse 14, this is what Ray was talking about, especially because of the reference to the two virgin daughters in the next verse as ones who remain with you, literally are found with you. It appears that Lot had other daughters already married, and not that the two in the house were betrothed but still unmarried. So big family, but we don't have an exact census of the Lot family.
So the married ones would have been out of the house by that time, so they would not be covered by the admonition.
That's how I read that, John. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so back to the joking. The verb, though in a different conjugation, is the same as the one used for Sarah and Abraham's laughter. It is, of course, a wry echo, the laughter of disbelief of those about to be divinely blessed, the false perception of mocking laughter by those about to be destroyed. The common denominator in the antithetical usages is skepticism about divine intentions for good and for evil. So, this questioning of God, not believing God. Anything else? I liked Alter's note on verse 19, and that's why I showed the image of the harshness of Sodom. I cannot flee to the high country. Lot seems a weak character. He has to be led out by the hand from the city or by the scruff of the neck, and his zigzagging determinations of flight make psychological sense. Accustomed to an urban setting, he's terrified at the idea of trying to survive in the forbidding landscape of cliffs and caves to the south and east of the Dead Sea. But once having settled in the little town of Zoar, he has understandable premonitions of another cataclysm, and so decides that after all, the rocky wilderness is the lesser of two evils. So lots, trying to figure it out. Okay. Anything else about these verses through 23? So Lot wants to get out of Dodge and go to the little town nearby. Okay. How about we just read these 3 paragraphs and then we'll move on to the shame of Moab and Ammon, which is disturbing. Would someone like to read these 3 short paragraphs?
I can do
Okay.
I
that.
could read it.
Oh,
Yeah, lots
go
of
ahead, Ray.
Whoever wants.
Any volunteers?
Well, yeah, we got fire and sulfur and fire and everything else. I mean, that's my territory.
Fire away, Ray.
Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord and looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, toward all the land and the plain, and saw the smoke of the land going up like the smoke of a furnace. So it was that when God destroyed the cities of the plain, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, where he overthrew the cities in which Lot had settled.
Thank you, Ray. Sort of an iconic moment in Hebrew scripture.
Did they tell the wife not to look back or only Lot? I hope he told his wife. He should have told her. Don't look back.
So did anybody say to anybody not to look back?
Yes,
Yeah.
flee for your
Yeah,
life,
it's in there.
Angels told
not look back or stop anywhere in the plain. And it says, when they had brought them outside, they said. So it sounds to me as though she got the message, but it's hard to know. But that's a great question, you know. Was that fair that she got turned into a pillar of salt?
Well, it's scary. I mean, if somebody comes into your house and says, go, and then that's it. And it's such blind faith that you're supposed to have that you really were supposed to leave,
I
When you hear all of this
Also-
happening behind you.
Yeah, exactly. How could she not
Hard to
look
resist.
back, right?
Yeah.
Why do you
I-
suppose the angels told them not to look back?
Obedience to God.
Hmm.
Don't
Put
long
your
for what is
trust in
lost.
us and don't look back.
Mhm.
Well, it would be traumatizing to see your city with all your buds raining with fire and raining down on it. So maybe
Yeah.
the protective admonition, you don't want to see this.
Right. Well,
I
and
also
in her
wonder-
case, it would be daughters and sons, perhaps, and
Yeah. I also wonder if the pillar of salt, seems to me it's the kind of thing where there may have been a geological feature
Mhm.
that everybody knew about, and legends grow up to explain the
Exactly.
geological feature.
Exactly.
That this was, these stones are, never mind, long story, forget it. Anyway, I just feel like that little artifact is possibly taking something that is true locally and making it a part of the story to make it seem like evidence of the story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's going back to what Ray reminds us about the oral etiology of these stories. These stories rose up, as campfire stories, right? So can't you just hear the storyteller saying, Lot's wife, she looked back and you know what happened? She became a pillar of salt. And all the little kids go, woo! You can just imagine that. So it's got a great dramatic effect. But again, looking at this geologic formation, the topography of this area, what Sue said, absolutely. I remember the first time I went to the Dead Sea, all of a sudden I went, oh, that makes sense, because there are these what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. But these structures, these organic structures that clearly are crystallized basalt.
Uh, can I
Please.
keep going back to the text? We ask why.
Why do we want to do that? Why do we want to go back to the text?
Because, well, because there may be an error in it. We might find.
I'm teasing.
But what
Teasing.
I'm mindful of is that Lot is regarded as an outsider. That's part of the problem with staying there. Maybe he's already got the vibes that this isn't going to be a healthy place. And when the messengers come through and say, move it out of here, there's reason to believe that he never felt welcome there.
Mm-hmm. Well,
nor his people who would be in his, I would guess, his retinue, his household, his herds, whatever.
absolutely. And as soon as these men show up at the tent, or at the gateway of Sodom, the townspeople come slinking out to see what's going on. That's not, again, not hospitable. So there's this tension between outsider and local. Absolutely. When Alter said, there's some good psychological reason behind his behavior. Yeah.
And in that context, then Lot is welcoming the strangers because he knows the dangers that they would have sleeping in the town square, which is what they proposed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that underscores the perception of unwelcomeness.
This is not a safe place.
Yeah.
I want to go back to what Sue was saying about the protective quality to the angel's warning. Flee for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the hills or else you'll be consumed. So there's this tension. Is it the because I said so, God said, don't turn around, and she turned around. So zap, she gets, turned into a pillar of salt. Or is the intention more of a pastoral one that, this is your community, this is your city. It's going to be really painful to look back. And scary to see, the fire and brimstone, right? So what do you all think about that?
I wonder what the angel's original intention was, because they came when Lot was sitting in the doorway, and as Ray said, then they really declared that they had planned to stay the night in the square. But he offered them so much hospitality. So is that what changes their mind? And he gets saved at the last minute. They didn't come to save him like God came to save Noah, but his hospitality, he was the one good person there, and they thought, okay, we'll spare you, but you have to put your faith in us.
Great question. What do y'all think?
Possible.
Would it have been a test of Lot?
I feel like it's,
That's
a
interesting,
test of
yeah.
faith, or I mean, going back to that question, Patty, about is it because it's too painful to look back? I mean, I feel like when horrible things happen, like children die or something, and we have to identify that body, and people want to see it because they want to have closure, or I can't imagine that it was because it was too painful. I mean, I might have read it metaphorically, had she not turned to salt, that he's saying, don't look back, as a metaphor. Just live for the future. This is behind, the past is behind you. But then he turned her to salt. So then I'm like, well, I guess it's literal, but I don't know why, other than for faith.
or the narrator is making it literal, is
Mhm.
making it, when I said earlier,
Yes.
I feel like the landscape is a character in the story.
Yes.
That's one of those moments where,
Mhm.
I mean, literally a character becomes part of the landscape, right?
Yes.
She becomes calcified, literally, in that spot. Going back to the question that Donna raises about the angel's original intent, the way the story is set up, do you think it's random that they come upon Lot and he's good to them? And so that's why, he entertains angels unawares, and that's why they want to save him? Or have they been sent there for him? What do you think?
I think they're sent there for him because we get 4 and eventually 3 people who come out. If
Hmm.
there'd been 10, he would not have destroyed the cities. So we got to have a small number. They're righteous, or at least they're related to Abraham, so we'll help them out.
I tend to think the same way, John. And there are all of these parallels, these similarities between the Abram encounter with the angels and the Lot encounter. And, the laughter, the angels coming to the gate or the door, come in, wash your feet. You know, the negotiating, there are echoes between Lot and Abraham. And then at the end of this episode, when we come back to Abraham, it's like a sandwich. It's almost like a Markan sandwich, right? We started in chapter 18 with Abraham, and then he's looking out over, what is it, Hebron, and now at the end of this episode, Father Abraham appears again and is, surveying the cities of the plain. And so, I think in the fact that Abraham is Lot's uncle, I feel like this is intentional, at least at the level of the narrative. Whether that's God's intention or not is a different question. But the way the storyteller is structuring it, it certainly sounds like it's intentional.
In both the Abraham account and the Lot account, it's I'm going out on a limb here, but it
Go
seems
for
to me that the Abraham and Lot both give a sign to the incoming angels that they are the right ones by the offer of hospitality, the acting humanly, if you would.
it.
It's kind of like the Masonic handshake. If they hadn't offered that, they would not have been known as the marked, designated person, perhaps.
This is a common motif. Also, I'm thinking of Philemon and Baucis, and I think it's Jupiter and Mercury visit them in their little hovel, and no one else takes them in except these 2 old people who are poor, and their sign is I think they have a goose, and they decide to fix it for the dinner. And in return, Jupiter and Mercury grant them their life's wish, which is that they will die together at the same time. But it's the same kind of motif.
Mhm.
And I
Yes.
just wonder, are storytellers borrowing a little bit here too?
I would bet that's true. I wanted to show you a couple of pieces of art before we move on with Moab. Hang on one sec. Okay. One, the flight of Lot and his family from Sodom. Rubens. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, the angels are very female looking.
Yes.
Hmm.
they're pretty nicely dressed.
It's like one of the
Very
women is
flowing
pregnant.
silk robes.
Yeah, this one here in the purple certainly looks pregnant.
Yeah.
Which is confusing because we don't know
Right.
what actually happened to the sons-in-law of the married to the daughters who were married.
Well,
And
Lot's
these
willing to farm his daughters out to anybody who doesn't commit a homosexual act, so God knows they're virgins, he said. So
Right.
that
Remember,
can't be
there were
one of his
multiple-
this
daughters,
one was
right?
is not a virgin.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah,
And
that can't be
remember,
one of his daughters.
well, yeah, it can be
Well, let's not make assumptions
multiple
based
daughters.
on weight.
Mary was the first virgin mother.
No, but as we talked about before, there are multiple daughters, some of whom are married, and a couple who aren't. So it's possible
Okay.
this is one of the married ones. I would assume
got
so.
it.
And then these are a couple of the unmarried ones. But look, going back to the question, I think it was you, Kim, who said, I hope that they told Lot's wife too that she
Mhm.
better not look at. In this painting, it looks as though the angel is very specifically talking to Mrs. Lot, right? And, pointing ahead. And so that's just interesting. The way he interprets the story is that, yeah,
Mhm.
she got the message,
Mhm.
but couldn't help herself from looking back.
Mhm.
But the person who's looking back seems to be Lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
looking at his daughters. And I think that this is a foreshadowing a little bit of what's coming in the next section of Genesis 19. So we'll look at that in just a second. And then this one,
Hmm.
Wow.
what do you think
Yeah.
about this?
Yeah.
What do you see?
Something evil this way comes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can only think of the tracks going into Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's
Right.
exactly the image. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm pretty sure that's intentional. That is
absolutely.
what is intended.
But
Yeah.
how does that connect with Lot's wife?
Well, I think anyone witnessing this kind of horror would quite possibly be paralyzed
Yeah.
by the horror, by the sheer horror of it.
Agreed.
Mhm.
That blurry, there's this kind of a shadowy form. I don't know whether that's in the painting or my monitor, but right there, yeah, that looks kind of an angel of deathish.
Yeah, there's definitely a little face area.
Do you think this is supposed to be her perception looking back?
That's probably it.
That's interesting.
I agree with you.
I couldn't stop looking at this one myself, so I wanted to share it with you.
And I first read this in Sunday school or whenever it was a long time ago during the Cold War. And so the theory that I was told is that it could have been some kind of radiation that turned Lot's wife to salt. Figuratively speaking, I guess, she got zapped or something.
Mm-hmm.
All right on the beach.
It's really evocative.
Mhm.
All right, with your permission, I'd love for us to finish this chapter. And let me just go back to Reuben's and having Lot looking over his shoulder, I guess his left shoulder, at his daughters. And then this one who is pregnant. So would somebody like to read this paragraph for us, the last part of chapter 19?
I will.
Thank you.
Now Lot went up out of Zoar and settled in the hills with his 2 daughters, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. So he lived in a cave with his 2 daughters. And the firstborn said to the younger, Our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to come in to us. after the manner of all the world.
Thank you. Yes, sorry about that arrow.
Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, so that we may preserve offspring through our father. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father. He did not know when she lay down or when she rose. On the next day, the firstborn said to the younger, Look, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine tonight also. Then you go in and lie with him, so that we may preserve offspring through our father. So they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger rose and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay down or when she rose. Thus both the daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. The firstborn bore a son and named him Moab. He is the ancestor of the Moabites to this day. The younger also bore a son and named him Ben-Ami. He is the ancestor of the Ammonites to this day.
Thank you, Sue. I wasn't kidding about it being disturbing. What do you make of this? Is this a familiar part of the story to you, or? Yeah.
Oh, I'd forgotten it.
Yeah.
Like Noah after the ark.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So what do you hear in this part of the text?
Oh.
Hello, hello.
Oh, it was a leaping cat. Sorry.
Gets the gold in gymnastics. Hello, Mr. Puck. Oh, you're so beautiful. Hi.
So what do the Moab and footnotes C and D say? And why are we blaming the Moabites and the Ammonites on being incestuous as in origin?
So, okay, so I'll go to altar in just a second, but to answer your question about the footnotes. So Moab means from the father, father having a double entendre there. And then Ben-Ami, son of my kinsman. Ben meaning son, meaning family or soul, blood relation, and then me is the possessive. He is the ancestor of the Ammonites to this day. So let's take a look at what altar says. Oops, sorry. Okay, that's the. Let's see. Okay. The narrator withholds all comment on the incestuous enterprise of the two virgin sisters. Perhaps the story may draw on old pre-Israelite traditions in which the supposed origins of these two peoples in incest were understood as evidence of their purity or their vitality. One recalls that Tamar, the progenitrix of the future kings of Judea, became pregnant by her father-in-law through pretending to be a whore. Never say the Bible's dull. But from the Israelite perspective, this story might well have cast a shadow of ambiguity over these two enemy peoples. Both names are etymologized to refer to incest. Moab, which probably means desired place, is construed as Meab from the father, and Ben-Ami, yielding the gentilic Bene Aman, is construed as my own kinsman's son.
So they were, Patty, they were enemy peoples, so that they were, to cast on them as being the result of an incestuous relationship tends to denigrate them.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
But they're the surviving sons of Lot.
Yeah, exactly. And then let us lie with him. Although lie with is a somewhat euphemistic reference to coitus in English, its usage in scripture suggests it's a rather coarse, though not obscene, verb for sexual intercourse in biblical Hebrew. Two linked sexual assailants, the Egyptian woman in Genesis 39 and Amnon in 2 Samuel 13, use it in urging the object of their lust to submit to them. When the verb is followed by a direct object in sexual context, the meaning seems close to rape. Ironically, the more decorous verb to know is used twice here asexually to indicate the drunken Lot's unconscious state as he deflowers each of his daughters. What do you think about these daughters?
Well, it looks to me like the dramatist here is going to great lengths to make sure it is clear that this was their idea and Lot
Yeah.
has nothing to do with it.
That's right, innocent man. Yep. Yep. Oh yeah, definitely. So that's why I think in the in this one,
Mhm.
now we can kind of get a sense. We've got the pregnant daughter, and Lot looking back at them. I just think that this painting is so interesting. There's a lot of story being told in this scene. So in some sense, it is a story of origins, as John was saying, why the Moabs and the Ammonites are so awful. The Moabites, I should say, and the Ammonites are so awful, the enemies of the Israelites, because these depraved women seduced their father to get his seed. And so, of course, we've got this whole, if you think about this story in the context of Abraham and Sarah, right, and Hagar and Ishmael, and we're coming up next time to reading about the birth of Isaac, whose birth has been predicted, and both Abraham and Sarah laugh at it. So we've got all of these inappropriate couplings and leading up to the birth of Isaac. So, I think that that's interesting too. The English major in me looks at, the way the narrative is structured. It's like, oh, this is kind of pointing us toward something very different.
On the other hand, I think these women are not painted as doing this out of lust.
Mm-hmm.
They are doing this to keep the family line going
Mm-hmm.
and have children so that they will not be alone when they are old, which
Mm-hmm.
is the fate worse than death, or the fate equaling death.
Mm-hmm.
They are not portrayed as doing this for fun or out of lust. They're doing this because we need to prolong the family.
Mm-hmm. There is, as Alter points out, there is the connotation in the verb choice. It's the same verb that's used later on in Hebrew scripture about, it's on the verge of rape. So there is a hint there, but the story sets it up that it's, we want his seed to keep the family going. And the point I was making about leading up to Isaac is throughout this whole cycle of stories, the Abraham and Sarah, Abraham and Hagar story, the tension has been between barrenness and the threat of barrenness and fertility. And so the fact that this story is juxtaposed with what's coming next week, with the birth of Isaac, I think that's interesting, right? Is that, these women, desperate not to be alone, desperate not to be barren in their old age without children, desperate not to be childless cat ladies. Oops, did I say that out loud?
Oh,
Sorry, couldn't help it. They do what is shocking and unthinkable for a reason. And the narrative sets that up over against what's going to happen with Abraham and Sarah. So, I just think these themes, Lot and Abraham, are parallel and are compared and contrasted a lot in 18 and 19.
I sort of hate to ask this, but was it shocking and unthinkable? Is father-daughter incest forbidden anywhere in the Old Testament?
It's a good question. Probably not as shocking as it is in our context.
Wasn't Abraham himself, Sarai was a cousin or a half sister? I mean, it goes back several places.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at the family tree. Of course, he tries to pass her off as his sister when they're in Egypt.
Yeah.
But I do think that the bloodline is very close. Just we'll say that.
Family tree like a telephone pole.
Yeah. Not lots of branches, right? Yeah. Ooh. Going back to your question, Sue, I definitely think that there is a cultural prohibition. Again, the fact that these enemies are being depicted as the results of incest, I don't think it's a flattering depiction. Probably it's not as shocking as it is in our context. I would say that. That's a great question.
The fact that they have to get both Noah and Lot drunk to make this happen indicates that there's some prohibition going on. That this is not something that
yeah.
Lot would do. It's a bright idea of his own.
Oops, what happened? Okay, here we go. Yeah. Well, that's a great question, Sue. And my study Bible does not say much about it. It comments that it recalls the drunkenness of Noah and the sexual indiscretion by one of his offspring. Yeah. I don't think it's good, but maybe not as bad as we understand it to be. But I'll see if I can find out further, get some further commentary on that. Great
How
question.
about the girl's statement that, gee, there's not anybody else on earth?
Yeah.
I mean, Abraham and his family are all up in Hebron, and this hardly is the end of everything. You're in a cave, yeah, but
But if they both only have sons, then they're going to have sex with their sons to have daughters to have sex with their sons. Really. And it just goes on and on.
As
You got this all
women,
worked out. Yes.
as women, they cannot travel safely anywhere. They can't go back to Abraham. They do not dare leave the cave as women. If they have sons, the sons can leave the cave. The sons can travel, but they as women cannot.
Good point.
I don't imagine they could have taken a lot of, I mean, Lot had a lot of money and goats and whatever, but they're running out with the shoes on their feet, and that's it.
Yep.
Yeah. Again, looking at this landscape, it probably felt like the end of the earth. The pickings were slim. And there was this impulse, this instinct that the lineage must be continued.
Mm.
It's, you know, it's deeply upsetting. And again, look at the barrenness, thinking about these themes, look at the barrenness of this landscape down there. The bottom of the earth, literally.
What
So,
is that structure anyway? I mean, it's modern.
yeah, looks
You
like
know?
an abandoned
Mhm.
house of some kind, and there's like this little lean-to or, you know, something over here. Yeah.
Mining of some kind, maybe, or minerals or
Salt
salt.
mine, yeah. I'm going to send you all this article. This is from a few years ago. Oh, come on. Don't need all the paywall stuff. But, you know, was this a natural phenomenon that happened? And then, you know, the backstory is crafted to explain what happens to Sodom and Gomorrah. I will send this to you.
Was smote?
I know
Right?
that too.
Oh, my English major friends, is that right?
Don't think
I
so.
caught it too.
I
Yeah.
thought smitten was.
He was done smote.
Was smited.
I'm sorry, Forbes. I just.
You can't say smitten because that's got a completely different
That's
sense.
Yeah,
true.
smitten has the connotation of like by love, but
That's right.
Right.
Lovesick. Who knows? It may be an archaic past participle. Another thing to look up.
It's passive anyway.
thus appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And it
Oh.
that
Yeah.
an exploding meteor smote the city of Sodom. I mean, rephrase it. I'm an editor.
Well, I will send you that article and I will let you parse it for yourselves. I look forward to being with you next time. It's hard really to, you know, where do we go from here? We go to the birth of Isaac, which I'm glad actually to get out of Sodom for a while. So, thank you all. This was a wonderful discussion, and I hope to
Thanks,
see you
Betty.
all next time. Bye,
Thank
friends.
you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Patty.
Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.